Hey there, folks. Just a heads up that in the first part of our recording, the A segment, where Paul and I talk about our day, the high-quality version of my audio was corrupted. So for that first, probably about 6 minutes, what you'll be hearing is my backup audio. If you're new to the show, welcome. And don't worry, I promise the whole show doesn't sound like that. Hold hands and close your eyes. It's midnight, and you're listening to the Ghost Story Guys. Welcome to the Ghost Story Guys. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
And this is the show where we talk about spooks, specters, and all the other things watching us from the shadows beyond the campfire. Some conversations only make sense after the sun has set, and this is most definitely one. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 211. And we're coming to you from that tiny mountain cabin you dream about, but can never quite reach. Paul Bestall, my friend, you are trapped in the midst of a home renovation, and I do not envy you.
Yes, it's a challenge, but we're taking it a day at a time, and hopefully we will get through this together. We'll be okay.
We have both been through the wars this last week. I am in Victoria, and essentially since I landed, my cats have been in a state of distress of one kind or another. And then yesterday I spent most of the day in the emergency room with Nikki. So it has been a challenging week. She is okay. Thankfully now, folks, she was identified and corrected. Luckily it happened while I was here. And so it has been a whole lot of something, Paul. I'm looking forward to telling stories about time slips that Luke found for us. He got some pretty cool stuff, as well as some interesting kind of like interstitial material, things that are not like full stories, but are kind of interesting perspectives on the phenomenon of time slips.
Yes. Yeah, there are some juicy ones over the years. There's two or three from here that are quite intriguing.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, funny enough, I forgot to bring this up in our Patreon pre-chat that we just did, but I'll mention it later on. Nick is actually working on a cold case. She works with an organization that helps identify bodies. Essentially, they sort of work with the UK police to help them identify bodies from cold cases. And she is working on one from Sheffield. So I thought at some point I will mention that to you, and maybe not on air, because I don't know if that's exactly appropriate. I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about this off air or on air, but most everything's in the public domain. But it's really interesting shit. Sheffield, it's all going on.
I'm aware of one cold case in Sheffield from about 20 years ago.
Is it the Totley Tunnel Man?
No.
Oh, okay, that's the one they're working on.
Oh, that's around the corner from where I am.
Really?
Totley, yeah.
Okay, so we will talk about that before we finish for the day, because I have some questions for you.
Okay.
Where were you? No.
Yeah, Totley Tunnel, so it must be to do with the train then, I would imagine.
Oh yes. I'll tell you more off air. It's pretty gross.
Because that's the tunnel in Threads that the train gets strapped in.
Oh, no kidding. Okay, well, I have so many questions, but again, they are not relevant to time slips, which are what we're here to talk about today. Although I do have one little spooky thing that happened, which I thought you might find interesting. So I mentioned on a previous episode that I had found or heard through the grapevine that the coffee shop, which our listener Teresa first took me to when she came to visit me in London, and which has become kind of my regular coffee shop, is haunted. And I heard that it was the source of some poltergeist activity. Now, I hadn't really chatted to any of the staff there, even though I've been going there fairly regularly for a year. I would just go get my coffee and go. But it came up that I mentioned recently that, something about I have to go to work after this. And they asked, what do you do for work? And of course, I said, well, I'm actually, I make podcasts, and said, we record at a certain time on Thursdays. So the next time I was there, they said, what kind of podcasts do you make? And I said, ghost stories. And they actually validated that claim. That building is, in fact, haunted by poltergeists. And now, I have not had a chance to check this out yet, but supposedly the hair salon, which shares a building with this coffee shop, they have on video and have posted to their Instagram footage of things flying off the shelves when no one is around.
Cool.
So yeah, very cool. So again, as soon as I find it, I'll let you guys know. But yeah, I thought that was great because I had kind of not given up verifying it, but it was just one of those things where it's so I got to go there. Not got to. I like going there, so I don't want to be the fucking weirdo who's like, "Hey, tell me about your ghosts." And then every time now I go to get an Americano, they just look at me askance. They start spitting on my espresso Oreo.
Hey, I was telling somebody the other day when I went to watch the boxing just before Christmas with my mate. We obviously had several refreshments, and then after the fight, talking to somebody, and this guy was from Australia, and so obviously the first thing I said to him was, "Have you ever seen a yowie?" And he went, "What? You know what a yowie is, mate?" "No, I've never seen one, but my dad did in the blue bands." So I was talking to that for about 5 minutes with this kid, and he just couldn't get his head around I knew what they were. And then he went, "Anyway, you have a great night, mate." And off he went. And my mate went, "Fuck, that's mental. You shit that bloke up then."
That reminds me of the time I was, it's not as impressive, but when I was road tripping across the U.S. with my friend, and he had to drop me off in L.A. He's like, "Where should I drop you off?" And we're just rolling into L.A. We'd driven again, started from New York. And I said, "Oh, just leave me at the West Hollywood Best Buy." "What? Why the fuck do you know where that is?" And I'd been there before on another occasion to buy electronics for someone I was staying with. But yeah.
Just go past the sign marking the famous 1861 Bigfoot battle, and it's the third left after that.
The good old Bigfoot battle. And while in this episode we may not have more stories of the good old Bigfoot battle, we do have time slips. But before we tell those, we have to thank our patrons.
This one's for the patrons.
Patrons, we could not tell stories of the big old Bigfoot battle or old-time Bigfoot battle or whatever the fuck it is I called it 3 seconds ago that I can't remember because I'm very tired.
Ye olde Bigfoot.
Thank you, ye olde Bigfoot battle we could not tell those stories without your support. And while every single person who downloads the Ghost Story Guys helps make us who we are, our paid subscribers are the ones who truly allow us to continue. Folks on Patreon, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube are invaluable, and we could not do what we do without you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, while we'd like to thank all of our paid subscribers, we would especially right now like to thank our latest ones. They are
Peter Taberner,
Eric Abel,
Sarah Wapner,
Rachel DeBono,
and Kelly Coughlin.
Again, guys, thank you so much. We cannot tell you how much we appreciate it. Especially me, having had to take the cats to the vets multiple times in the last few days. Your support is very, very much appreciated. And while we'll wait till the end of the show to tell you about all the cool stuff you get, we will say for $1 a month over at patreon.com/ghoststoryguys, you get an ad-free feed. And who doesn't want that? Ads suck. Again, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys to get in on that action, or sign up to become a friend of the cabin on Apple Podcasts or YouTube. All right. We are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with stories of time slips.
Builder. I'm currently 67 years of age and have some ability to see or hear what others cannot. What I'm telling you of in this writing took place when I was around 10 years old, and it's one of the earliest events I recall with detail. We lived on a farm that had been in our family since 1791, but first I must explain that my mum had died from cancer, and my dad, being a farmer, worked many a long hour of the day. It was a different time then. I was raised to know right from wrong, and although I was left alone, I knew where on the farm my dad could be found. Before my mum died, she and my father had purchased a small horse for me named Boots. She and I were best friends through the next few years, meandering around the old roads and paths that covered our hilly 600-plus acre New England farm. This event took place on an early summer's day around 1960. I had been too lazy to saddle Boots up, and so we were just hanging around together inside her pasture. The pasture was part of an old apple orchard and part grazing grass placed on one of the larger hills. At the top of it was a brook, where on this particular day we were heading towards. I lay on the back of Boots with my eyes closed, enjoying her slow ramble when, without warning, Boots had come to a quick stop, and I felt a ripple pass over her back, so I struggled up to a sitting position. She'd begun to do a prancing dance, and I feared I'd fall off. Where Boots drank from the brook, there was an old stone wall, one of many running around and over the fields and woods. Beyond that was a sturdy barbed wire fence that my father had placed, and the brook ran in front of both fences. I thought I could see something move and rubbed my sleepy eyes trying to focus on this movement. Boots was trying to head away, and I had to hold her reins firmly. What I seemed to be able to see was an older man wearing an odd hat, a light brown shirt and brown pants, but no shoes. He wasn't clear as I faintly saw the woods and fence behind him. He was bending and lifting large rocks, is the best I can explain. He seemed to be placing these stones on top of the stone wall, building it higher. Boots had stilled, feeling no danger, and we watched for a very short while, and the man looked up at us, and then just faded away. I knew I'd just seen a moment of the past, and was still somewhat afraid. Boots cantered away as I shook my head in disbelief. As always during that night's supper, my father asked about my day, and after listening, he first said never to lay down on a horse as it wasn't safe. I can still picture him lifting up his fork of food and slowly chewing. He then said, "That man was probably not from this century, probably a great-great-grandfather. How very lucky you were to see that moment from the past." Later, in need of money, that section of the farm was sold off, and some new people built a home there, and I've often wondered if they too have seen that faded worker from long ago.
Very cool. And I wanted to start with this one because this is sort of borderline between haunting and time slip.
Yes.
You could make the argument either way, but I thought that the father's presentation of it as, I bet this is just a long ago worker, someone kind of living his day. So you're kind of seeing through to a different time. I thought that was an interesting way to look at that. And I do think that is a reasonable way to sort of look at some of the hauntings we've talked about in the show, and I know, again, there have been sort of skeptical arguments about the positioning of the planet and so on and so forth. Timing is different, but I just think that it's really whatever, but I think it's a compelling theory because
Yes.
Certainly, there are cases I've talked about on the show that I've personally, or not me myself, but a friend of mine has had experience with, or friends of mine rather, multiple people. And they do seem like they were kind of looking at something that was not a ghost, because it was just a surprise to see them as they were to see it. And it's almost like they were seeing a part of the past. And we've kind of speculated that maybe the person who they saw, there's a chance that at some point in the past, or maybe the future, they have a story about seeing a ghost man or a ghost woman.
Yeah, I always remember one that was told on Art Bell on one of his Ghost to Ghost specials. And it was a kid who told this story about when he was younger, he went downstairs to get some milk and cookies out the fridge late at night. And as he went towards the kitchen, he saw this man wearing what he thought was a hood hanging around in the kitchen, and it looked like he was making a sandwich, and it startled him. And he went, "Oh!" And the man looked up and saw him, and he seemed startled as well. And so he ran off back to his bedroom, locked the door, head under the covers, and didn't think anything about it. Which you think, fair enough. But then he said, 12 years later, I'm stood in that kitchen making a sandwich. I'd just come in from a night out, and I'd got my black hoodie on because it was a bit chilly. As I'm making this sandwich, I heard a noise. I looked up and I saw a small child coming into the kitchen. And when it saw me, it screamed. I dropped my knife and the child ran away. And so that one,
shit.
you think, I've never heard one like that before. That's what's always stuck with me about that particular story, because it's basically someone seeing themselves twice.
Yeah, and we actually had a story like that on the Haunting of Toronto episode.
Yeah.
There was someone who, when they were older or younger, they saw some strange man looking at them on, was it like Bloor or Dundas or something. And then years later, that they were standing there, they were looking, and they saw themselves as a child
Yeah.
looking at them. That, oh man, that stirs something in me. I don't even know exactly what, but I find it both like wonderful and upsetting at the same time. I don't know why.
Yeah, absolutely. It's strange that the event doesn't seem to make relevance until the second part of it.
Yeah, but I wonder if that's not, like, that kind of holds true for so much of our lives, I think. You know, there are things that they don't necessarily make sense. I mean, I don't think our lives always proceed along like predetermined paths. I'm not that Catholic, but at the same time, I do think there are certain things that maybe can only make sense in hindsight. And again, I know some people would say that's just us kind of like finding reason, but I do think sometimes there are arcs, larger arcs, that make sense once you evaluate them that way. Like, there was actually, I'm just trying to think now, there was something that occurred to me. I was having a conversation this morning. I went for coffee with a friend of mine, and we were talking about this, and it's this idea that, well, the fact that I'm here, the fact that I decided like this is the year, because I've been away from Victoria for my birthday since 2023 and 24, I was out of town. And this year I thought, I'd like to go back. I want to spend my birthday with Nick. And so I actually ended up paying more for a flight than I would have if I'd waited. But I thought, no, I just want to be here. And it turned out that, I couldn't have picked a better time. Yeah, I needed to be here. And I think there's a lot of occasions like that where you can, like, I can look at jobs I didn't get. Even Nick, actually, you know, we've been talking about this because there was at one point in her career, she worked in law enforcement, and ever since when she was living in England, and when she moved over here, she really wanted to go back there. And so we've kind of every decision that she's made with her career and kind of we've made together in terms of like planning where we're going to be has been predicated on this idea that eventually she's going to go back there. And she had applied for probably 24 jobs in this one particular area that would have allowed her to sort of more or less return to some version of what she wanted to do. She wouldn't actually be in law enforcement because it's structured differently here than it is in the UK, but it kind of would have allowed her to go in that direction. And instead what happened was every time she was like, there was one where it was literally guaranteed that she would get the next spot. And then the person who had guaranteed that for her left the position. But now this other opportunity has presented itself that allows her to do the things she wants to do, as I mentioned actually at the top of the show, without having to be in the North American police environment, which is very different than the UK one. And I think would have been culturally a very difficult fit for her. So sometimes, again, I guess it's a cliche phrase, right? Things happen for a reason.
Yeah, there's been a couple of occasions in my life where I found myself in a situation where I know if I hadn't made a decision to be where I was, then I wouldn't have been able to help. Yeah, that's it, man. Although not to say that if you're enduring something bad, that you should continue to endure something bad. Let's make that very clear. If you're in a bad situation, folks, and you have an option to get out, get the fuck out. Yes.
Don't be like, oh no, the universe must want me to suffer. Nope. No, I don't think that's true. I think if there's an off-ramp, that means you can take an off-ramp.
Well, that's not quite true, is it?
How's that?
Dallas Cowboys fans.
Oh, that one's just for you, Peter. That one's just for you.
Yeah. Somebody sent me a meme the other week about that. Say that Simpsons, like, stop, he's dead.
Stop hitting him. He's already dead.
Leave them alone.
Yeah. I remember someone shouting a version of that when I was a kid. A friend of mine who always had a little bit of an overinflated idea of how much of a tough guy he was, decided to square off against a bully or someone he felt was bullying him. And the bully soundly whipped his ass. And I remember one of the girls shouting, "You're killing him, you're killing him." And I'm like, no, he's not killing him. He's teaching him a valuable lesson. That's what he's doing. He's not killing him.
Stay in your lane.
Yeah, although he never did, actually. I think, some guys, I think, get their ass whipped and they kind of learn like, okay, good. That's what that feels like. Now I know. All right, I'm aware. I'm going to take this on board like I did once. I remember the very last time I was in a fight, a friend of mine was getting jumped by a kid about 2 years older than us. So I jumped in there. I thought, this is not on. So I jumped on his back and I distracted him from hitting my friend because he was now fully focused on hitting me. And again, I was 2 years younger than him. I was smaller than him. And he busted my lip and, hit me a few times in the face. And I said, okay, I'm done. And it was over. But I learned, right? Like, okay, that's what getting hit in the face feels like. That sucks, But, at the same time, it wouldn't discourage me if I saw someone getting fucked up and I thought it was unfair. I would do the same thing. I would do it over again. I'd be a little more cautious how I did it now because the stakes are much higher in your 40s when you get hit in the face. But
use sticks.
Exactly.
Everybody stops punching people when you hit them around the head with a bit of 2-before.
That's a Paul Bestel recommendation right there.
You can count on it.
But yeah, but again, my friend, I think he took that hit and he's like, nope, this will drive me forever. I must now tell everyone how tough I am and focus on all the ways I am tougher and better than the people around me. So sometimes getting your ass whipped, it's better for you. And sometimes it just makes you worse. A&E. Back in 2021, when I was 41, I was admitted to Wiston Hospital in the northwest of England with sepsis. It turned out I had an MSSA blood infection and a heart infection called endocarditis. I stayed in the hospital for 6 weeks while the antibiotics did their job. Thankfully, I recovered, but something happened during that stay that I still can't explain. Wiston Hospital has been around for a long time. The old building had this 19th century look before it was rebuilt in 2010. To clarify ahead of time, the old build was knocked down and the new one was built in its place. The new build feels modern and clinical, nothing like the older structure. While I was there, I had a bit of a routine. I'd leave my ward, take the elevator down, go outside for a cigarette, and then come back the same way. It was quiet at night, and I didn't think much of it. Until one night, everything changed. That night, after my usual cigarette break, I got into the elevator and pressed the button for my floor. Instead of going up, it began to descend. I thought it was just a malfunction and planned to press the button again once it stopped. When the doors opened, the vibe immediately felt off. The hallway didn't look like the hospital I was used to. It was darker, emptier, and just wrong. The walls looked older, like something from decades ago, and there wasn't a single person in sight. I don't know why, but I stepped out to look around, even though I had this strong gut feeling that I shouldn't. To my left, I saw a doorway with a sign above it that said accident and emergency. Well, that didn't make any sense. A&E was supposed to be above me, not below. I kept walking, and the further I went, the stranger it got. The air felt heavy, and everything was eerily silent. Then I saw the beds. They had these old metal frames with thin blue mattresses, the kind you'd expect to see in an old hospital, not a modern one. The further I walked, the darker it got, and I started feeling like I was being watched. I panicked, turned around, and ran back to the elevator. When I pressed the button for my floor again, thankfully it took me back up. After that, I avoided using that elevator whenever I could. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen, but I tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, or maybe a strange part of the hospital I didn't know about. About a week later, I needed to use the elevator late at night. I hesitated, but pressed the button to call it. When it arrived, I froze. Instead of showing a floor number at the top like usual, it just displayed the letter X. I noped out of there immediately. I don't know if that's standard behavior for a malfunction or some kind of error code, but I wasn't about to find out. Even now, I don't know what to make of the whole thing. I've heard people talk about time slips and stuff, but I don't know if that's what I experienced. All I know is that it felt wrong, and it's something I'll never forget. So I was wondering, Paul, are you familiar with Wiston?
I've heard of it. It's is it Lancashire? Wiston? I don't think it's as far up as Cumbria.
It is in Merseyside.
Oh, right. Yeah. I thought it was near Manchester, yeah. But yeah.
8 miles east of Liverpool, according to Wikipedia. Mm-hmm. Interesting. So not a big place then?
No. I mean, it's one of those places, there's lots of little towns between Liverpool and Manchester that tend to get overlooked because they're near two massive cities.
Oh, okay. Right. I was wondering if there had been sort of stories about this place. Because in the thread that Luke found with that story, a number of people were kind of surprised to see mention of their town. They said it was, kind of like, I assume that meant it's sort of an unremarkable place, but I thought, well, if anyone else would have heard something, if there is something to hear, it would be you.
I believe there was a very a well investigated haunted house, I think, from the 50s in Wiston.
Okay.
But I'd have to check. But it's one of the, like I say, like you mentioned there, it's not a remarkable place, but it doesn't mean it's dull. But there's tons of places like that where it's just everybody's eyes are drawn to the big lights of the city down the road, really. So all the strangeness seems to be attracted to the major city. So that sometimes pulls weirdness away from these little towns.
I was wondering about your thoughts on this one, because to me, this sounds, I don't know if this is what the A&E department of this hospital looked like. And folks, if you're not aware, the A&E is what the English call their emergency room. Their ER is, our ER is their A&E. But there seemed to be some confusion or some disagreement as to whether that's what it looked like. Obviously, it wasn't underground, so that makes the fact that they went there strange by going underground. But then, as I've told my story as I've told my own hospital elevator story on the show, sometimes that alone does not, you can't say like, oh, well, that just doesn't make sense. But sometimes the elevator just takes you somewhere you didn't intend to go.
Well, I'm old enough to remember where you would have random letters on elevators, or lifts, as we call them here. Rather than actually saying what it was. So yeah, I've been in a lift where it says X, and obviously the first thing you think is, oh, pressing that. What's X? So I think they just stopped putting them on, or they just called it a normal number. But yeah, if you put X on a list of buttons to press, who isn't going to press X?
I don't know. Given what happened to Twitter, I might not now. But yeah, interesting. So I wondered if maybe this was just that could actually prove or sort of help go to the explanation that this was a vestige of another time period. Because if this was a more modern experience, but the elevator was still saying X, that could somehow validate that they were in a different time.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me. It certainly gives it a bit more validity, because it's not something people are very familiar with.
No, I'd never heard of that.
It's definitely an English thing, or a British thing.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'll be honest. The town I lived in, we had one elevator in the hospital. So I didn't exactly grow up in a technologically forward place. Like it was such a novelty that my grandfather used to take me to the hospital so I could ride the elevator. So tells you again, this is like, oh, we didn't have an escalator. I don't think we still don't have an escalator. I was scared of escalators for an abnormally long time. I don't know what a normal amount of time to be scared of an escalator is, but whatever it is, it was beyond that.
Was it from watching the X-Files?
No, I did not watch the X-Files until about 3 years ago.
Oh, so you were afraid of escalators before Tombs?
Yes, I was afraid of escalators back before it was cool.
I used to work in a nightclub where the lift was haunted.
Really?
Have I not told you this story about the nightclub we worked in? It was an old cooperative building, and it had been converted into a nightclub in the early 90s. And the lift was quite temperamental. It wasn't like the best lift in the world anyway. It was one of those, if there was more than 5 people in it, you were pushing your luck.
Right.
It would stick, which was always great. But it was, lifting crates of beer everywhere. You had to use a lift to get them onto the second and third floors, because it was just, physically, well, it wasn't physically impossible, but it'd take you forever to carry case after case after case to try and fill up 7 bars. So we had a lift, but this lift, certain people just didn't like it. Girls didn't like using it. And one of the women I worked with, Angie, she was the manager for downstairs in the cafe bar. And she pressed ground floor, and it went straight past the ground floor and went into the cellar, which was a bit creepy anyway, because that's where I had that incident with the barrel that just rolled down the cellar very quietly, a full barrel.
Yeah.
And she said she was stuck in the bottom of the lift. I mean, she was trapped in it for nearly an hour, and we could hear her screaming till we could get her out. And she couldn't, the doors wouldn't open, nothing happened. And she said she was in there, and after about 20 minutes, all she started hearing was children crying.
Oh, God.
Like weeping. And it went on for, about half an hour? And then all of a sudden, the lift just went straight back up to where she'd come from, and the doors opened, she fell out.
Oh, wow. So it's like, I'm done terrifying you. I'm done traumatizing you. Have fun now. Go on with your day.
And she never used that lift again.
I can't say I blame her.
So yes, and that lift is no longer there. The building accidentally burnt down during renovation.
This well-insured building accidentally burned down.
That random nightclub fires that seem to afflict cities and towns in England. such an unexpected surprise.
Paul is winking so hard, I think he might cause the camera itself to crack. But yes.
I mean, some would say perhaps even a nightclub company called Gatecrasher, who lost 5 buildings to fire. Some would say that was suspicious, but not me.
No, some people just have runs of bad luck, Paul. It happens.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, the last one caught fire several weeks after they'd lost a court case to insulate it. Very strange.
Oh, the Lord works in mysterious ways.
Certainly does.
Next up, we're going to take a quick break from the stories to share this article that Luke found. It was reported by Chortle on October 24th, 2024, whatever the fuck Chortle is.
It's the comedian's website, so it's all about comics, comedies, sitcoms, stand-up. So it's like the British. If you want to know anything about comedy in Britain, Chortle is the website you go to.
Oh, okay. There we go. So originally published on October 24th, 2024, and the title is Stuart Lee has revealed that he once experienced a time slip. The comedian said he was in the ruins of Fountains Abbey in Yorkshire. I see you've got Fountains highlighted there, Paul. What's up there?
I didn't mean to do that.
Oh, okay. I thought you were like, this idiot misspelled it or something like that.
No. You're all right.
The comedian said he was in the ruins of Fountains Abbey in Yorkshire when he was suddenly transported back to before it was dissolved by Henry VIII. And the revelation on Danny Robbins' Radio 4 podcast Uncanny is all the more surprising as Lee was on the show as a skeptic. Asked at the start of the show if he believed in ghosts, he said simply no, despite having a long interest in folklore. However, later in the show, when discussing one listener's paranormal experience of a previous era, Lee said he'd had a similar experience. He said, I had a time slip, but I didn't even know what it was called. I was in Fountains Abbey, which is a ruin having been trashed by Henry VIII in order to create beautiful ruins that would then inspire romantic poets 300 years later. Okay, I have questions for Paul about that, but I'm going to read the rest of this article first. And I went into the Abbey, the main part of the Abbey, and for a few seconds, out of nowhere, it knitted itself together around me. It was full of monks facing away from me towards the altar. The walls were all filled in, the stained glass windows were back, and interestingly, the walls had frescoes on them, which I think would have been the case at the time, but not necessarily something I would have known, I don't think. When Robbins expressed surprise that Lee had such an experience despite dismissing the supernatural, the comic said there was probably a rational explanation. He said, I would have been on tour between gigs. I was probably drunk the night before, or certainly in a state of sleeplessness due to adrenaline. I don't entirely trust my own responses to things. But it also looks a bit like the cover of that Black Sabbath album with all the monks on it, which might have been in there as well. I didn't mention it to the person I was with because it just seems so mad. You know, you don't want people to worry about you. Robbins then noted, that's a very interesting line to say. It felt real enough to you that you felt if you articulated it to somebody else that they would worry that this was your mind malfunctioning. Now, of course, the only player in this I'm familiar with is Danny Robbins, but I just am fascinated by this. But this is someone who's like, well, I'm sure there's an explanation. I was tired, and you know how when you're tired, you hallucinate an abbey, the original appearance of which you could not possibly know? You know how that happens.
Yes, happens to us all. Yeah, Stuart Lee is a comics comic. So he's one of the high priests of British comedy. He's very acidic. He doesn't suffer fools. He's more sort of culturally in touch than a lot of people. And he doesn't do the normal kind of run-of-the-mill jokes. He tends to do a lot of social observation and quite political stuff. If he gets you, he's basically got your hook, line and sinker, and you'll devour everything he does. He's a certain level of taste. You have to know stuff to get him, but he's very good.
That's cool. Funny enough, actually, I was just listening to the new episode of Better Offline, which if you folks haven't heard it, it's very, very good. It's a tech news podcast. And the host is an Englishman named Ed Zitron. And he just interviewed Andy Richter, who of course is a famous American comedian. And I don't know, it's just a really great conversation about what comedy is now and lazy comedy. And it's really good shit. It's not paranormal in any way. But if you are interested, and I am if you are interested as I am in the vagaries of the tech space, I recommend Hardly Better Offline if you're not already listening to it. And Andy Richter just sounded like a good dude, like a comics comic, you know. Well, he's not really a comic. He doesn't do his own sort of like stand-up routines, but he's a very, very funny man and has been working in comedy for a very long time. And it was just a really great conversation.
I was glad the question was about that. I thought you wanted me to explain the dissolutions of the monasteries to you.
I was kind of hoping you might have something to shed on that. Like, what the fuck was that all about?
So when Henry VIII asked the Pope if he could divorce Anne Boleyn and the Pope said no, so he went, well, bollocks to this then, I'm going to form the Church of England, and was excommunicated by the Catholic Church over this. Henry went, right, what I'll do is I will destroy every Catholic church and abbey in the United Kingdom, and I will take all their gold, and I will kill all their priests and monks, and I will take all their lands, and I shall give them to all my mates. And so they went round Britain, well, mostly England and Wales, and destroyed all the abbeys in the country and removed all their books, gold, silver, jewels. Thousands were murdered. And that's how we created the Church of England, and everybody lived happily ever after.
Wow, when someone just says, oh, the old C of E, there's a whole lot contained in that sentence. And I don't think I realized that.
But he did write Greensleeves, so, you know, shing and yang.
Yeah, if not for the murders, you know, like Catholic Church, again, I was a member of the Catholic Church. I'm not real impressed with them. You know, they've got a real history of bad actors, but it's hard to get behind the straight up murder. Yeah.
Well,
okay. Controversial opinion from Paul Damien Bestel.
And then obviously that all started the whole Mary Queen of Scots, Queen Elizabeth thing.
Right.
So obviously they were both, Elizabeth was Mary was his first wife's child, and Elizabeth was Anne Boleyn's, I think. Yeah. And so obviously Elizabeth was Protestant, Mary was Catholic. And that's why we had the 7-year period after Henry VIII passed and Mary stole the crown. And then obviously everybody rose up and she was executed. She was held in Sheffield, strangely enough, Mary Queen of Scots. Huh. And then obviously we killed her and Elizabeth returned to the throne. Hurrah!
Man, people, as much as we change, we don't change that much.
Well,
it's all just bunch of people getting laid and then fighting for power in the aftermath.
Yes, and that was the end of the Tudor dynasty after Elizabeth, and then obviously we got the nutter King James and his Bible and the man who saw witches everywhere. And within 50 years we were at civil war. So, you know.
That's hitting a little closer to home than I'd like right now, Paul.
Yeah, you get through these things. Well, you know, there's a small segment of 100 years of English history for you there.
There you go. That's what you tune into Ghost Story Guys for. Spooky stories, history lessons, random lectures on things. Actually, that's. I think this is a good time. This is a short segment, so I'm going to share this. So we had a couple people after quite a few people actually, after you and I came out in support of the trans community here on the show a few episodes back. We had a lot of folks reach out and say, you know, thank you for doing that. And which was, you know, fair enough. I mean, we didn't do it to be thanked. We did it because, you know, it just is the right fucking thing to do, but fair. It's always nice when people say that. But we did see a resulting drop in numbers as well. So, you know, there are people who, I mean, some of them did not keep their thoughts to themselves, and that's fine. I don't give a shit. But some obviously just fucked off, and good riddance. But, you know, one person said, like, well, why'd you feel the need to say that? You know? And I specifically, this is, I want to say this is, aside from just like, this is what you fucking do, because, you know, it's the right thing to do. But there's a reason I specifically said it. And I'm gonna share a story that's kind of embarrassing for me. But about 20 years ago, now I got it in my head that I don't know why. I was a young man. I was stupid. I got it in my head, you know, I probably don't need to keep washing my feet, right? Like the soap and water collects down there. It's going to get clean. It's going to save me time. I'm fine. I don't have to bend all the way over, you know, all the way down there.
Good for you.
So I just didn't for a little while. And of course my shoes started to fucking stink, because that's what happens. But because I was like, why do my shoes stink? I'm washing my feet. And then finally it took an older man who's probably my age now took me aside and said, "Hey, brother, are you not washing your feet?" And I explained my system to him, and he's like, no, you can't do that. You have to wash your fucking feet. You can't, it doesn't work like that. You have to do it. And it was embarrassing, but he was very good about it. He was very kind. And it was just like a, hey, just so you know thing. It wasn't like, you dope, anything like that, or like, you fucking idiot. It was just, hey, just so you know, man, that's not acceptable. You have to do it this way. And I did. And it was never a problem again. And like, I didn't realize at the time how important it was, because I've never really had an older man in my life to like kind of give me good advice when I needed it. You know, because like say my old man was an addict, so he was gone pretty early. And, you know, my grandfather, he was helpful, but again, for reasons I won't get into, like he was not helpful with certain things. And so like having an older man come along and say, hey, just so you know, like that's fucked up, don't do that, was very valuable to me. The reason I said it, and the reason we both said it, is because more than anything, I think other men need to hear this shit from men, right? Because there's so many male voices out there right now saying dumb shit. Just the dumb, and a lot of them are being paid to do it, quite frankly. There's a lot of dark money going through some really fringe podcasts that are being paid to just say the most heinous shit because it serves a purpose. And I mean, hey, if there's some like shadowy organization who wants to pay me to say nice shit, I'm all ears, man. I got vet bills to pay. But
Come
like,
on, Antifa.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Where are you?
But yeah, just to be clear, like it's not about brownie points. I know there's some people who have this idea that, oh, you say things because you want, I don't know, like whatever, you think you're scoring brownie points. Neither Paul or I give really two shits what anyone thinks of us. And you can't make yourself an ally anyways, right? You can't be like, I'm an ally, because that doesn't work like that. People will themselves determine whether or not they feel safe around you. But we said it because it had to be said, and because I think it's important for men to say this shit to other men, you know? And who, you know, maybe you won't listen, maybe everyone on board already was on board, or everyone listening was already on board, I don't know. But you got to say it as opposed to not saying it, because I think the time for not saying shit is past. You know, like not everything has to be quote unquote political, but being decent to each other is not a political fucking statement. That's just a statement of simple fucking humanity.
And you can't go, oh, you don't need to say that. No, you fucking do sometimes, right? And it doesn't matter what you're saying. If you're standing on the right side of the protection of people who may feel frightened, scared, and it's a well-known fact that anybody in the LGBT plus community needs strong voices in support of them, because it helps, because a lot of them have to deal with the fact that their immediate family will turn their backs on them. And that alone can drive people into mental crisis and suicide. And I'm sorry, if somebody's sexual preference that has absolutely nothing to do with you and has no impact on your fucking life whatsoever, sometimes you've got to stand up and be counted for, because it's that kind of thing where, you know, it's the kind of crap where people say, I don't see colour. Well, you should, because if you did, you'd understand what some people have to go through because of shit like that, because they're purely judged on how they look, not who they are. And therefore, important and valid parts of society need to be protected by the people like us who can walk wherever we want to, at any point of the day, anywhere near enough in the world, and know that we will be all right because we are mostly white men. It's as simple as that.
If I kiss my wife on the street, no one gives a shit. No one bats an eye. But there are people out there who, if they were to do the same thing with their partner on the street, in Canada, in America, there would be people who would respond with violence. And that's the simple dividing line. There's some people for whom just living their lives is enough for other people to commit violence against them. And so, yeah, you just got to say shit. You don't have to make it your whole fucking personality, which is not what we're doing. But it's important that, again, dudes like us, you know, bald, angry motherfuckers like us, make sure that people understand which side of that line we're on, and tell other guys, like, hey, just leave it alone. Look at the people who are saying shit to you and figure out what is their angle. Does it not seem weird that every single outlet has what seem to be the same talking points? Does that not seem weird to you? If someone's telling you that you personally, you should feel aggrieved, you should be angry because these people are taking something from you, does that not seem a little weird? Does it not seem like, that's exactly what I want to hear. They're telling me exactly what I want to hear. I wonder if I should investigate this further. And if your answer is no, well, then maybe you should. Again, we're not going to hate you, but you got to fix your heart. And this is just, again, your favorite internet uncles telling spooky stories and reminding you, don't be a garbage person, because there is a lot of money out there right now being spent and being sent to these douchebags to convince you to be a garbage person. And you're better than that. You're smarter than that. Don't listen.
High fashion. Many years ago, I was visiting my friends in Denmark because they were getting married. I was joined by my mother and her partner. I had to buy a dress for the occasion, so a few days before the wedding, the three of us went shopping on Strogart in Copenhagen. I was really optimistic about finding a dress, but it turned out that most of the shops only had stuff that I didn't like. The colours that were in fashion that summer were rather dull in my opinion. It started to rain a lot, and we'd been walking around for hours. But I finally noticed a store that I'd always liked a lot. It's a chain, and me and my mum went in there while her partner smoked a cigarette outside in a little covering just outside of the store. It barely shielded him from the rain, but he was happy to be able to have a smoke whilst we looked around inside, and he did smoke a lot. I will never forget what we saw inside. The store was full of people, but also the clothes were beautiful. They were almost exclusively in colours that I like. Lots of purple dresses in all shapes and sizes, and skirts that had patterns from gold, purple and whatnot. I said to my mum that this was definitely what I needed, and I'd be buying lots of things, not just the one dress, and she agreed. Even though this shop was mostly for younger women, she saw things that she wanted too. We both had wet hair and clothes from the rain, so we decided to come back again the day after and go straight to the store, because we didn't want to be trying on stuff while wet, and whilst we wanted to have lots of time and not leave her partner standing outside for too long. Also, this store, unlike the others we'd been to that day, was full of people. It was on 2 floors, and we could only see the stairs leading to the top floor and glimpsed a tiny bit of what seemed to be up there, but judging from what was downstairs, we were sure it would be just as great. So we left and went straight home, and I was really giddy with excitement about going back the next day. I don't really like buying clothes for myself, and this is the only time I've ever been giddy about going clothes shopping. Now on to the next day. We go straight to this store, which was a bit of a walk from the bus stop, but right away I noticed something was off. It had the same sign outside, so it was definitely the same place. A drugstore I'd visited before going in there was still across the street, but there were some things that didn't look the same. I shook off this feeling and still went in, really excited, as was my mum. But inside the store, there was nothing but the same dull stuff that had been in every other shop that year. Such boring colours. And it looked completely different in every way. I remember my mum's disappointment. She went up to the woman that worked there and asked if they'd changed everything overnight. And she said, "No, we only bring in new stuff once a week." And there was not even a second floor anymore. Literally nothing looked the same inside. We had to face facts that we weren't going to be seeing any of those beautiful clothes again. One other thing that we noticed after coming back out was that the smoking area that my mum's partner had stood in while smoking in the rain the day before wasn't there either anymore. I've often wondered about this, and me and my mum used to talk about it a lot. And she said she was sad about it for years, and she's really into clothes. It's probably the only time me and her had ever bonded over clothes, and I wonder what would have happened if we'd bought anything there. And is stuff like this possibly happening more than we think? I've only ever heard of one similar story where a guy working in Iran went to a really nice diner in a mountain village that was on a second floor over a gas station. Everyone he worked with said he was making it up, because it made no sense that a fancy diner would be operating in such a remote place. But he took them there one day really excited to show them that he was right, and when he got to the particular village, everything looked just as he remembered. The same gas station was there, but once again there was no second floor. He remembered it as being the best dinner he'd ever had, and so cheap that he couldn't believe it. I can still vividly remember the interior of the store and all the beautiful clothes I saw that day. I would describe them as dreamy. Another thing that made this store different from all the others, that it was full of people. There are lots of clothing stores on Strogad, and none of them have been particularly busy that day. Far from it even. Then why would this one have been so crowded and full? Anyway, this is one of the strangest things that's happened to me. I was making a list of stuff like this whilst watching the TV show Dark with my husband. He thinks strange stuff is always happening to me, but he agreed that this was probably the strangest thing, and the fact that my mother experienced it too, and her partner who doesn't believe in anything supernatural, makes it impossible to deny.
So that's really, really interesting stuff. I mean, that I think what's even more interesting is I'm pretty sure I know that Iranian story. I am certain that comes from Mike Dash's Borderlands book, where he compiles a number of stories like that. Because I think that used to be one that Mysterious Universe used to harp on quite a bit. And again, I bought the book, and actually, funny enough, I actually have it in the living room here, and it is in there. So it's again, it's just weird to have that one kind of come back after all these years.
Yeah. It's very similar to the Bold Street one in Liverpool, which is probably the most famous time slip story here in the UK.
Oh, do tell.
So that's where a police officer walked into a shop on Bold Street in Liverpool. And essentially, I think this was early 90s. And he walked in, and as he walked in, he basically walked into the 1950s. And he couldn't believe it. It was all dressed up and done out as though an old-fashioned store would be, and it was really odd. And he realised that everybody, because there are certain people, the way people were dressed, in those days, everybody would wear suits and hats and things, and the fashion was distinctly different, especially in the 90s in Liverpool. I would imagine.
Sure.
And so he seemed really shocked. And the strange thing was, he turned around and he saw a girl who'd followed him into the shop, and she was also experiencing it. And this was one of those stories where a lot of people kind of said, is it really? Yeah, is it one of those? Because it's been told by a certain person whose grasp on the truth of the supernatural stories he often writes about is very tenuous, shall we say?
I know who you were talking about. Kev has also mentioned this person in past.
Yeah, he's one of those who tells stories about people dying when they see ghosts and nobody's around. So how do we know the story then, dickhead?
So funny enough, I will talk about it here, but I had an article slated for an interlude that is exactly the story you're talking about. It was from 1996. And I'm glad that we're doing it here instead, because it specifically name checks that author, and it would have been impossible to not out them as being a bullshit artist.
I'll always dance around that. I'll always dance around it.
No, that's fair. You guys have very, very different libel laws.
Oh no, I don't give a shit. But I don't know how much influence he still has in the British paranormal scene.
That's fair.
After 40 books of bullshit, you would think he might do. Anyway, do carry on, sir.
No. I mean, that's essentially it. Was I think the only details here is that his it was a Saturday, July 1996. Him and his wife Carol were visited Liverpool to do some shopping. She went to Dylan's bookshop, and I guess she wanted to buy a copy of Irvine Welsh's Train Spotting, and he went to a record store. And then about 20 minutes later, he walked up there, and yes, that's when he saw the things you're describing. And he said that instead of Dylan's bookshop, there was a store called Cripps there.
Yeah.
And as you say, it was a woman's clothing store.
Oh.
Women's handbags and shoes. He turned around, saw the people of Bold Street wearing clothes, of course, as you describe. And then, as you mentioned, there was a young girl in her 20s who was dressed in hipster clothes. She had a bag that said Miss Selfridge's on it. And she went to Cripps. And he says as he went in, the whole building of the interior changed to the Dylan's bookshop. And the girl, as you say, she also experienced it, which I don't know if I've ever seen a time slip that has changed that dramatically, that where it kind of flipped like that so quickly.
Yes, but there is a epilogue to that.
Oh, do tell.
Because Danny Robbins found her.
Really?
And she
Robbins!
Danny Robbins. Danny found her for the first season of Uncanny, the TV show.
No
and they
shit.
were on Bold Street. And she basically told the story and said, yeah, that girl was me. I am the girl in that story.
Amazing. So did she have anything else to say?
She just basically said exactly the same. And she said the thing was, she knew that he knew that they were both not supposed to be there. They were the only people that looked modern. Everybody else was weird. And that's why he mentions things like the Miss Selfridges bag, which is obviously a chain that started here in the UK. Late 70s, I think, maybe 60s. But it certainly wasn't around in the era that you wouldn't have. Miss Selfridge was always kind of a sort of younger sort of market. It was like teens and 20s. It's kind of hip, trendy clothes for young women and girls. So it wouldn't have been the kind of shop that would have been around in the 1950s, you know, at all. But yeah, I mean, how 90s can you be? Because at 1996, that was the only book anybody wanted to buy was Trainspotting.
Right.
I can only imagine normal people reading Irving Welsh for the first time. Jesus. Christ. It's a good job it wasn't Marabou Stork Nightmares. Fucking hell, what a book that is.
Oh, really?
Oh, fucking hell. It's one of them books you've no idea, you've kind of got an idea what's happening until the last bit, and then you're like, oh my fucking God. Crazy. Is it a dream or is it really happening? It's all about a guy who's tried to kill himself.
Oh, okay.
And he's coming in and out of a coma. Well, basically he's in a coma. And so he can hear things, and and basically he's going through his life and how he's ended up in this point in his life where he's tried to commit suicide. And what's got him to that point. So he's basically, the book is about him. He's dreaming about marabou storks, which are awful creatures that shit on themselves in Africa. They're very ugly birds. They're big, ugly fucking things. They make a load of noise. And so he's having these dreams about these birds, sort of intermingled with his memories of his life and clubbing and all the stuff that he's gone through in his life. And there's an incident that's happened. And the ramifications of that incident are also running parallel throughout the book. And every so often, you'll hear about one of his old friends, and his mum will be telling him, oh, have you heard about such and such? Yeah, he got run over in the street. Oh, did you hear about such and such? Yeah, he drowned really strangely. And after about 3, you start thinking, hang on, why are all his friends dying really weirdly? And then you get to the thing that happens that connects all the dots and why he's there. And he suddenly, he kind of has this awakening where he's kind of, his brain has fixed it all and he's coming back out of it. He's going to be a better man. He's going to sort his life out. And the twist at the end, fucking hell.
Oh. Okay.
Man alive. It's my favourite Irving Welsh book by a million miles. I think it's a much better book than Trainspotting.
All right. That's Marabou Storks?
Marabou Stork Nightmares.
Marabou Stork Nightmares. All right. Well, there's your book club challenge, folks.
See if you can make it. Through the end. To the end. It's worth it. But yes, Trainspotting, compared to that, was pretty light reading despite its subject matter.
That's incredible to me because, again, I've never read the book, but I have seen the movie, and to think that there's something that makes that light reading is pretty impressive.
I mean, the book is darker. Irving Welsh
Really?
is not a... the film version is a very sanitized version of Trainspotting.
Holy shit. I watched that movie once in the late 90s, and I think like around maybe 99, 2000, and I thought, nope, I don't need to see that shit again. People were talking about it like it's Pulp Fiction. I'm like, this is so much darker. This is so much grimmer than Pulp Fiction.
I think I saw it twice the first week it came out. That's just how it was. That's what growing up in Britain in the late 80s, early 90s was for a lot of us.
Right. I mean, that's fair. That makes sense. You would have that connection to it.
Yeah, us Northerners have always had an affinity with the Scots. We're near enough the same.
Yikes. That was an Irvine Welsh yikes, not a Scottish yikes. You guys are fine. I have no beef with you, Scotland. And just want to tell one more quick story here. We have 2 bonuses to go along with that high fashion story. Maybe I'll read the first one, and then Paul, if you want to read the second.
Maybe.
So, okay. Well, you can have a think about it while I'm reading it.
Okay.
So this person says, mine isn't as in-depth, but I sort of had an experience like that. When I was like 6 or 7, I went to Florida to visit my aunt that lives near Fort Lauderdale, and she was taking me to Disney. We went the day before to Orlando, and we're going to pick a hotel for the night and go to Disney the next day. We were on a highway and passed a really cool-looking hotel with a beautiful blue pool outside that looked really fun, with a busy parking lot and so on. So she got off at the next turnoff to go back to it. When we got there, it was definitely the same place because it had a unique theme and features, but the parking lot was empty and the pool was close to empty, brownish and full of leaves. The building looked way more run down. I was so confused. My aunt right away was like, "What is going on? The pool didn't look like that when we went by. Is this place abandoned?" We kept talking about how freaky it was and just ended up staying at a crappy Super 8 with a broken door lock, but I'm glad I wasn't the only one who saw how awesome that place looked the first time we went by. I will never know what happened. And yeah, again, just same idea. Things just not adding up. Like, again, just full-on pure time slips.
And the second one, so I've decided I'll read the second one now. I've thought
What
about
a
it,
saint.
so I'd do my best. So this one is strange, and I was never sure exactly how to categorise it, so I blogged about it under a kind of what the hell heading. At 20th and Broadway in Lorraine, on the northwest corner, sits a storefront property. Today it's vacant and the basement entrance is concreted over. In the 1960s there was a drugstore there, and the basement had an entrance on the south side of the building, a flight of stairs guarded by a cast iron railing with a door and a narrow front at the foot of those stairs. Back in the late 60s, the basement space was the headquarters of a cab company which went out of business in 1970. The door was boarded over, as was the head of the stairway, and dust and debris had gradually gathered in the space below. Over the years, I generally passed that spot on foot at least twice a day, particularly as the drugstore had become a newsstand with a paperback exchange, where I traded my old readables for other books or cigarette money. The basement space stayed vacant, dusty, and unused. One night in the summer of '75, I was walking home from a movie downtown which was about 11 p.m. or so. As I reached the corner at 20th, I could faintly hear music and noise coming from the general direction of the newsstand. As I turned, I could see light coming from that basement entrance. When I got there, I was pleasantly surprised. The boards at the head of the stairs were gone. The stairs were clear of junk, as was the space below, and the door was open with light and music spilling out of it. Cool, I thought. Somebody's bought that, and maybe they're going to turn it into something interesting. Maybe I could get a job there. I headed on home and came back by the spot about 9 the next morning, only to receive a shock. The stairs were boarded over, covered with dust and debris, as was the space at the foot of them, and that entrance door was still boarded shut and hung with cobwebs, as it had been for years.
1986. I have the same routine every day. I get up at 5 a.m., eat something real quick, and watch a little TV. I get dressed, and then I head to work. I have one roommate, and we've had this apartment for about 2 years. So about 7 months or so ago, in February, I got up to get ready, and everything felt very off. I couldn't put my finger on why. Everything just felt creepy. Then I noticed on the counter there was a tray of American flag napkins, some homemade cookies with red and blue icing on them in the shape of stars, and some of what I assumed to be off-brand M&Ms. I thought it was weird since it was kind of still winter for my roommate to randomly leave out July 4th stuff. I got some food, turned on the TV, and noticed it was just random channels. I couldn't get any of the streaming apps. It was just regular TV, but old-looking commercials, newscasts, and one of them actually said something about a 4th of July sale. I was so freaking confused. I finally got to a weather channel, and in the corner of it was the date, July 3rd, 1986. I thought for sure it was, I don't know, a nostalgia channel or something, but every single channel I turned to was all old commercials and TV shows. Mind you, I was born in 2003, so I'm not familiar with 80s stuff.
Ah!
What is happening? Why is everyone smoking and saying slurs? So yeah, they were born in 2003, so I'm not too familiar with 80s stuff. So at the time, it just looked old to me. At this point, I was freaked out, and I tried to call my mom. I'm not sure why I felt like this was who to call, but it made sense in my head. When I went to dial her number, my phone just kept trying to dial, but never actually connecting. Now I was really bugged out. I was starting to panic a little, and I went to wake my roommate up. On the way to her room, I stopped in the hallway and saw a woman in about her late 70s crossing the hallway, holding a tray with something on it. She went from my roommate's room to mine and disappeared. It didn't look like a ghost. I mean, I'm assuming I've never actually seen a ghost, but it looked like a totally regular person. Panic wasn't even a word to describe myself at this point. So I ran into my roommate's room and flipped out and woke her up. I told her what was happening, expecting her to think I was nuts, but she wanted to see what I was talking about. When she came with me, the 4th of July food was gone, and the TV was back to normal. She believes me, and we still wonder if it'll happen to one of us again. All I can think maybe is there was a time glitch of some sort. It still freaks me the hell out thinking about it. I actually had a dream about something like this recently. I dreamed that I walked into a room that should have been familiar, but instead of what should have been there, it was like a kitchen, and the kitchen was paneled in sort of like this old wood, or like sort of wood paneled kitchen with these kind of yellowish countertops. And I realized that I had walked back into like 1999 or something. Like it wasn't the 80s, but I was in the past, and I was terrified because my phone was, I didn't have my phone. My phone was gone. I had no way to reach anyone, and there were people there, and they were all very nice to me, but they weren't my people. And I realized I have no way to tell Nikki where I am. I have no way to tell anyone where I am, and it was like a genuinely disconcerting dream, not like a horrifying, like a nightmare dream, but just a much more upsetting on a different kind of level, because you realize it's going to be years before you ever meet those people, and you have and now to them you've disappeared, and that has always scared me for some reason. Probably because I saw Flight of the Navigator too young. I've always had this like nightmare about disappearing for decades, and then coming back, and I'm the same age, but everyone's life has moved on. So it's just a very upsetting dream, and it kind of sounds, again, not a million miles removed from what happened here.
I'd be quite happy to wake up and realise it's 1986, as long as I was who I am now, and not the nerdy 13-year-old I was in 1986.
I was 3, so I would also not like to go back to that version of me.
I've been really annoyed, though, because I'd be thinking, all the records I could buy really cheap, but my money won't work.
That's it.
And you didn't use cards in them days?
No, I never have cash anymore. I would be a time traveling hobo, which is the worst kind of time traveler.
The only currency that is the same now that was then is change, but it's only pound coins that have stayed the same, and copper here.
Right.
All the other coins have changed size.
Oh, okay.
So our 1 pence and 2 pence pieces still, I mean, we still had half pences being phased out in 1986, which caused massive problems when I was a child, because all the shops put sweets up. So instead of getting 2 for a penny, they would keep the same price. So it was deeply offensive to a child who now only got 1 sweet for a penny rather than 2. We were outraged, Brennan. Outraged, I tell you. So pound coins had only just started coming in, and people didn't really I didn't like them, because I preferred to have a pound note, because it made you feel rich if you had paper notes rather than coins. But they're the only thing that's the same, because the 50p's are different shape now, 20s are slightly different, and we didn't even have £2 coins back then. So I'd be happy but frustrated, and probably get arrested shoplifting, like stealing records probably, or cheap trainers that they don't make, and I'd be locked up, and I'd be going, "I'm from the future," and they'd be going, yeah, where out you are, mate, wherever. Yeah. No, I am, help me.
Oh shit, you're the guy who calls into Art Bell. That's you lost your accent because you've been in the past so long.
Exactly, I am actually from 21-9000, and that's what happened to me. I fell through a wormhole whilst listening to synthwave, and I basically woke up in 1986, and had to go back again to save myself and bring one of my previous incarnations as the Count to rescue us all.
Man, Paul, I thought I had a lot of lore, but no. You are, as always, you're the king of lore. Actually, on the subject of synthwave, I can't remember if we talked about this, but of course, Vampire Stepdad had his album release party recently. His album release chat. So I was in the chat for that, and we were talking about how Spotify has gone all in on AI music. And I was listening to to a Spotify. What's that?
Hang on, I'm just about to throw up.
Yeah. No, hey, I'm with you. I am with you, because I was doing some work for the podcast. I was doing some writing, and I thought I need just like some instrumental synthwave. So I listened to all the Vampire Stepdad stuff, and then I thought, oh, let's just find something new. So I just punched in synthwave, and it gave me a playlist like instrumental synthwave. So great, sounds good. So I hit play, but something about it didn't sound right. It sounded like sometimes if you have really shitty music, it just makes you feel hollow inside. It is for me, it makes me feel really hollow inside. And I thought something about this music is not right. And I looked at the band name and I didn't recognize the band name. And I'm not hyper up on the synthwave scene, but something about it didn't, I don't know, somehow it all seemed off. So I Googled the band. They exist nowhere. Nowhere. And that's when I realized this is all AI fucking music. This is just an AI artist that they've slapped up here so they don't have to pay royalties to real artists. And I was so fucking mad. Between that and Joe Rogan talking about Canada like we're some kind of fucking dictatorship, I'm so fucking close to canceling my Spotify again. It's like, how many times do I go back? It's like a bad relationship. How many times do I go back only to have them let me down yet again? But anyways, it's not relevant to ghost stories or to 1986. I guess it's kind of relevant to 1986.
Well, to be fair, some people would say these days it's more relevant to 1984, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah, they would not be wrong.
A lot of literature references this episode.
Speaking of that Vampire Stepdad thing, there was a great moment, which I think is just a fantastic object example for what something to never say to any kind of creative. This is free advice from again, your spooky uncles here at the Ghost Story Guys. Someone came into the chat and said, man, I thought the first, because of course the new album is called Night Shift 2 K9 Cop. They came into the chat and they said, hey, I actually thought the first album was really bad, but this one is really, really good.
I used to hate you, but now you're great.
Yeah, that's it. And yeah, I thought the first, especially coming after Love Bites, which is a beautiful album, I just thought it was kind of weird and not very good, but I really like this one. And credit to Vampire Stepdad. Again, I actually don't know his real first name, but he's the sweetest guy. He's the sweetest guy. And he's like, I'm happy you like this one. I will kill you with my mind.
Okay, bye.
Oh, God. I just thought, who does that? Yeah, the first
that's
one.
The problem with doing release launches online. You see, you can't punch people in the face.
Well, again, he's such a sweet dude. I don't think he would anyways, but he should.
I would.
Yeah,
I'd do it for
I
him.
wanted to.
Fuck off. When's your album out, dickhead?
Oh.
Tell me, do you want me to play some Killers? Shall I do a version of Mr. Brightside for you, you soulless bastard? Do you like Queen? I bet you do. Wanker.
All right, slow down. I like Queen. Let's not. Paul and I fought about this on a recent patron bonus, whether or not Queen is good, and we came down on the side of I am right, and they are good. I'm pretty sure that was what we agreed to.
I said they've made 4 good songs ever.
And he was wrong, but that's okay. But we can agree that Vampire Stepdad is very good. And yeah, check out his album Night Shift 2 K9 Cop. It's a lot of fun. Got some great guitar work by Dimmy K, who, if you know Synthwave, you know he does a lot of guest solos. And seems to be a good dude. He was in the chat there as well. We were talking about video games and all kinds of other nerdery. It was a good time.
Cool.
And Paul wasn't. No, Paul was invited. It was very late night. So otherwise, he had been invited.
I was, yes. I was probably fighting off sleep by relaxing with a serial kill documentary or something.
Yeah, something soothing like that.
Yeah, well, I might like a light after something like that. It's amazing. I never have nightmares. Stuff I watch and I never have nightmares.
To be honest, I don't either. The only thing that's ever, I can think of off the top of my head, that's ever really given me, in recent years, when I was a kid, maybe it's a little more impressionable, but in recent years, the only piece of entertainment I've ever had a nightmare about was Timo Tchahanto's film Macabre. I had a night that it was such an uncomfortable watch for me. I turned it off, and I had a nightmare that night. But other than that, and if it was going to be anyone, it'd be Timo. That guy has got. I love his stuff, but he has got a dark, dark mind. People give me shit sometimes for some of the stuff I've written for Fear. Go watch a fucking Timo Giotto film.
Read an Irving Welsh book.
Or that.
Big light. I had a rather strange, almost eerie experience during January-February this year at our home in South Africa. I'm hoping that somebody can provide me with a logical explanation, because try as I might, I don't seem to be able to come up with one. I go through phases of insomnia quite regularly, and by approximately 3:45 on this particular morning, I knew it was time to get out of bed. I couldn't turn on the light to read or turn the telly on. My husband deserves some consideration, so I grabbed my usual paraphernalia off my bedside table and made my way to the kitchen. It was coffee time. Only when I was standing in the kitchen about to refill the kettle did I realise I hadn't turned the light on. At that time of the morning it's the logical thing to do, and then it hit me. It hadn't been necessary to turn the light on because my entire courtyard was almost as light as day, which in turn reflected in the kitchen to the extent that I didn't need to turn the lights on. I could see my way around with ease. Perhaps I need to explain that I don't have standard size windows in the kitchen. Mine are rather large. Also, I'd removed the curtains a few years earlier, firstly because I didn't like them, and secondly, they were unnecessary. Nobody can see into the kitchen from outside. It's fully enclosed by a courtyard and the outbuildings. The first thing I did was check on the outside light. This is just an ordinary light above the back door, and by no means lights up that entire area, and needless to say, that light was off. Of course, I had to know where the light was coming from, so I decided it was necessary to go outside and inspect, and with my hand on the doorknob, the thought flashed through my mind, no, hang on a minute, there might be some scary humans out there trying to set me up. At 4 a.m. on the 22nd of December last year, my husband and I had actually been held up at gunpoint in our house and robbed. So I walked into the dining room next to the kitchen and looked outside. Complete darkness. The same was with the lounge on the other side of the house. Darkness. Into the bathrooms, which are situated on the same side of the house as the kitchen. Darkness again. I went back to the kitchen. Light. Just to mention here, it was light enough for me to clearly see the red colour of the tiled roofs on the outbuildings, plus every single item, which is kept out there. But the trees in the background, outside the courtyard, were in darkness. And also, these aren't street lights. Our property is close to 2,000 square metres, and the street lights don't even reach that far. I speculated on all sorts of things, ranging from the paranormal to aliens, but didn't then, and still don't know what it was. My logical brain kept telling me this was normal, perhaps rare phenomena. My husband is convinced that it was something to do with aliens. No ghost for him. He fancies the little green men. Or perhaps I should make that the little green ladies. Well, eventually I dozed off on the couch in front of the TV and arose to natural light everywhere. Nothing strange in the courtyard. Everything seemed perfectly normal. It didn't end there. Just after 9 a.m. the same morning, I was cleaning my gas hob in the kitchen, still speculating about the earlier mysterious event. My rubbish bin is kept in a cupboard to the left and slightly behind you when you face the hob. It's quite a big bin, and I must admit it's very secure where it's situated. Well, I got the fright of my life when this bin simply fell out of the cupboard right behind me. The cupboard can't open on its own, it's impossible, and even if it could, that bin has to be taken out manually. It can't fall over. Fortunately, I'd emptied the garbage bag and placed it in the garbage removal bin, which stands outside in the courtyard, the previous day, so there was no mess on the floor. Well, this just knocked me for the rest of the day, and I couldn't come up with any logical reasons. So what did I do? I spent most of the day out on the veranda reading and talking to our parrot. Additionally, I can't describe the light accurately. It wasn't what you would call full daylight. The best I can come up with is something similar to early dawn when the sun has started to rise and your surroundings are becoming visible. However, that isn't quite how it was, and in fact it's quite difficult for me to liken it unto anything other than light, which it was. It's just one of those scenarios where you had to be there. Only the courtyard and outbuildings were visible, and the light seemed to somehow reflect into the kitchen. All the other rooms are in total darkness, including the garden, front, back and side. Nobody who wasn't present on the property that early morning could possibly have seen that light. This is quite a big property. 1,985 square metres to be exact. The courtyard area is walled off with high gates on each side, and not even the streetlights, as I mentioned earlier, can reach there. Anyone passing by would not have been able to see that area, light or no light. I have to admit that I didn't get it, although I saw the light. I still really wish that I had the courage to open that back door. I so nearly did, but my fear of scary humans prevented me. So thanks to the positive comments, I now do believe that we're being protected. I spend quite a lot of time talking in my mind to whom I hope is a guardian spirit, or any good caretakers out there, and ask them to keep us from harm in this house.
You know, I would never disabuse someone of the notion of their experience was positive. If they say to me, you know what, I feel positive about this, I'm never going to be one to be like, nope, I think you're nuts, but okay. But this is one situation where I don't necessarily know that's what happened here. Again, given the situation, I would never correct them because, you know, being the subject of a home invasion is a horrible thing. Like I cannot imagine. I mean, I've been mugged, and when I was a kid, our house was broken into a couple times. And that by far was the worst experience, was the like having someone break into your house when you were away. Or when you were out. I can't imagine having them break in and robbing you while you're there. Like
I've been burgled with somebody in the house while we've been in.
Oh, you have?
Yeah. It's happened twice.
Really?
The second time was really annoying because we'd not gone to bed till 4:30 and we got up at 9 a.m. and we'd been robbed. They even nicked the Hoover.
They took the vacuum cleaner.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
And it was summer, so he would have been seen walking up the street with a fucking Hoover at 6 a.m. or wherever it was.
How weird.
Anyway, do continue.
No, that's fascinating. The vacuum, I'm still getting my head around that. But it's really unusual, and it reminds me of something I was told, a story that someone told me a few years back. I want to say it was maybe slightly pre-pandemic, but they said they went through a period where they could see into the shadows at night. They said that, like, they went, and it's someone who I trust, they said that there was a period where they would be driving around at night and they would see the shadows. They would be aware of them, but they could still see through them. It was like there was almost like a golden glow that allowed them to see through the shadows. And for a while, they kind of assumed that that this was just something like a trick of the light or something, until someone, they mentioned it, and whoever they were with said, what? But it went on for, I think, a couple months where they could see again, like through the dark. And like, it sounds bizarre, but then, you know, I was at coffee today with my friend, as I mentioned. And as we're sitting there, he started closing his eyes, and I asked him if he was okay. And he said, well, I'm getting a visual migraine. He said, I don't get them as much as I used to, but he said, I still get them. He said, they're not painful, so don't worry about that. But he said that looking at my face, it looked like he was looking through stained glass, or that my face was stained glass. He said he gets these visual migraines. And then he kind of went on to describe it as more like I had like as he put it, a lopsided halo, which feels appropriate. And then he sort of said, oh, it's moving. And he said, that's weird. He said, I've never really noticed that before, but he said, it's moving out of my frame of vision. So it's almost like this visual migraine was passing in front of him. Which I've never met someone I've heard the term visual migraines. I don't think I've met anyone who's had one that I'm aware of. Like, Nikki has migraines, but she doesn't get auras or anything like that. She just gets really intense headaches and has to take medication for it. This was new to me.
It's not something I've any experience with at all, thankfully, touch wood. I've never even had a migraine.
I've had, I think, 2 in my life. You don't want them. I remember at one time, actually, I took one of Nick's pills because it just would not go, and I had this, and I took one, and I don't know how she does it. She's a tank. I would have preferred the headache. It constricts the blood vessels, but it constricts all the blood vessels. And so like I had gone to the gym, and my chest just started aching. Just like my muscles in my chest just started aching. It was hell. And so I told her, like, keep those fucking things away from me. I don't care how bad it hurts. I don't know. You're made of steel, my love. But do you have any thoughts on the story?
Well, the obvious answer would be, well, it would be a spotlight from a helicopter. It would be obvious.
Right.
No noise, is there?
That's it. Yeah.
Helicopters are not quiet.
No.
A projected beam of light would need to be attached to something extremely high up and be of such a focus that it would be akin to being a laser. So that's out of the question. And once again, you'd hear whatever was holding such a thing. It could be extremely focused moonbeams, but I find that very hard to believe as well.
We're in Dr. Evil territory then if you've got focused moonbeams.
I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Sure.
And so, I mean, the only thing that I'm aware of that people have reported in such a similar thing is a beam of light from a craft of extraterrestrial origin.
Okay, so the husband's explanation.
That's certainly, lots of people discuss beams of, focused beams of light from flying craft. Travis Walton was taken in a focused beam of light.
Sure, of course.
After they'd nearly killed him, and obviously he thinks that's the reason they took him, to repair him.
Right. Before we go, remind us what happened to Travis Walton, because I think that's a case, again, that for folks, if you've seen the film Fire in the Sky, that's the case it purports to tell the story of, but of course, it is not in any way accurate.
No. It's got lots of little strange things. I mean, the town of Snowflake in Arizona, which I always think is a wonderfully named town, quite oddly named for a state like Arizona, though I'm aware that it does snow there these days. And so Travis was a logger. And one particular evening, him and his crew were coming back. They were heading home, grabbed some beers before hitting the sack. And as they were driving along this road on their way home, they saw a strange craft hanging over a patch of trees. The guys stopped the car, the truck even. They watched for a moment, and then Travis, for some reason, felt compelled to get out of the car and run towards it. And as he ran towards it, it seemed as if the craft was trying to elevate itself, and a blast came out of the back of it, which knocked him several feet through the air, and he landed on his back. All his friends thought he was dead. They shit themselves, and probably not in the best of situations, decided to bugger off. So they all drove off and left him. And then about 15-20 minutes later, they came to their senses and realised, what have we done? We've left him there. And they went back, and he wasn't there. Neither was the craft. And so a manhunt began. The local police department were convinced that they'd all murdered him and dumped the body. All were subjected to interrogations by the local police force. And then 5 days after he vanished, his brother-in-law received a call early in the morning from Travis, who had found himself on his back in the middle of the road somewhere, and he'd walked to a payphone and called him. And he'd lost 5 days. And that's the start of what happened to him.
Fascinating. 1975. Well, folks, again, that is the story of Travis Walton. Is that what happened in this case in South Africa, or was daylight just somehow transposed in tonight via timeslip? We will never know, but we would love to hear your theories. Send us an email, ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. And that is our timeslip episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you have your own stories to tell, if you've heard of other timeslips, let us know. Same email address, ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. We're going to take a quick break and be right back with our Ghost Force shoutouts. Hey there, listeners. Before you reach for that skip 15 seconds ahead button, I promise you this isn't an ad. We wanted to take a minute to talk to you about mental health. On this show, I've always tried to be as honest and open as possible about my struggles with depression and anxiety, because even though we've come a long way towards acknowledging the very real damage these things can do, there is still way too much lingering stigma about reaching out for help. And when you start to feel like there's no help, it's easy to start feeling like there's no hope. But Paul has joined me today to remind you there is always hope and there's always help.
We're not going to try and talk you out of self-harming right now, because we know that's not how it works. Instead, what we wanted to do was tell you something now and hope that should things get bad, you'll remember it and make a phone call or send a text message before you make any permanent decisions. As someone who knows all too well just how important mental health can be, it's never too late to reach out.
In Canada, the number to call is 133-456-4566. In the USA, the new number to call is 988. That's 988.
In the UK, the number to call is 116123 or text SHOUT, that's SHOUT, to 85258. In Australia, the number to call is 131114.
However bad shit seems, it will pass. And no matter what your brain might be telling you at any given moment, and believe me when I say I know this intimately, there are people who love you and people who care deeply about how you treat yourself. Should a time come when you find yourself despairing, please know that we've both been where you are, and there is a way back to the world. Take care. Welcome back. The Ghost Story Guys are Luke Greensmith, who helps us find our stories and found the stories for this episode. He's also host of the Luke Lord podcast, available everywhere fine podcasts live. Tanya Downing, who manages our Facebook community. You can find us on there as the Ghost Story Guys finally made a group. Sarah Kent, who manages our Reddit community. And we're seeing some more activity over there, which is awesome, and that's at r/Ghost Story Guys podcast.
Our paranormal conductor is Mr. Brennan Storr.
And of course, my co-host is the one, the only, the inimitable Paul Bestel, the paranormal Johnny Carson himself, host of Mysteries and Monsters. Paul, what's coming up on M&M?
We're off to Bridgeport in Connecticut as we dive into one of America's most unusual poltergeist cases that was written off as a hoax, and yet it didn't seem to be at all. And so William Hall, author and magician, joins me to explain his investigations and everything he uncovered in regards to the police's attempt to cover it up due to the fact that 2,000 people turned up and blocked the street.
2,000 people blocked? Why did they block the street?
Because they came to watch the poltergeist in action, and you could look through the windows and see the fridge spinning on its own and things levitating, and so they blocked the street.
Holy shit. Okay, and where can everyone find you online?
You can find Mysteries and Monsters across most social media platforms and podcast sites.
Fabulous. I'm Largely the Truth on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd, although these days mostly just on Blue Sky. And you can find the Ghost Story Guys on Instagram as the Ghost Story Guys. You can also find my horror fiction story Fear Daily everywhere fine podcasts live. As we said at the top of the show, we couldn't do this without our paid subscribers. Ads help, but paid subscribers are truly the engine that drives this great machine. And in exchange, we like to give you bonus shows, monthly live streams, all kinds of good stuff. There is bonus chats between Paul and I. The one we did this afternoon will probably be about 45 minutes by the time I cut it down. So if you want 45 minutes of extra chatter between me and Paul every couple weeks, with the odd bonus show tossed in there, shows like Host Adventures and a couple little bonus ghost shows that I put together for you guys, you can find all of that at patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. Again, that's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. You can also sign up to be a friend of the cabin at Apple Podcasts or YouTube. And of course, if you subscribe at the $20 level, that makes you part of a very elite club. One that gets shouted out here every second story episode. It's a little something we like to call Ghost Force. That's right. Patrons at the $20 level and above get thanked here in Ghost Force every second story episode, even when we're both very, very tired, as is the case today.
Even on the spectral side, tiredness has no prisoners.
Yep, we're on the spectrum, we're spectral, and we're still tired. This time around, the members of Ghost Force are
Ethan Saragon,
Amy Chamberlain,
Charles Wood,
Crazy Mom Canada,
CT,
Dextrous,
Eric Abel,
Chloe Two Hats,
Gabrielle Hollanders,
Hannah Brown,
Jade Moores,
Jenny Bonanani,
Jason R. Slaughter,
Jennifer Mullen,
Joseph Como,
Kissing Kate Barlow,
Liam Hudak,
Mara Noriega,
Mark Semler,
Megan Rocket,
Merlin Hansen,
Peter Gunn 08.5,
Robin Teen,
Rocket Roddy Shenanigans,
Scrapbot 13,
Shannon Steyer,
Surreptitious Shipley,
and Trent Connor. You are the few. You are the spooky. You are Ghost Force. I'm saving that. For real, guys. Thank you so much. Again, we deeply appreciate every single person who both listens and subscribes, but Ghost Force, you're next level, and we love you for it. So thank you. And if you'd like to have your name read out there in that, you never know. It's our little Forrest Gump section. It's a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Have it read out there by signing up to become a member of Ghost Force on either YouTube or at patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. Unfortunately, we can't offer that through Apple Podcasts. They only offer the single tier. But if you want that action, again, YouTube or patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. Paul, my friend, your guest spot on Jason Hewlett's show finally came out.
Yes, it is live and happening as we speak. So yes, available where all fine podcasts live, and you can hear me chatting and chewing the paranormal fat with Jason.
And what did he decide on the name for the show?
Paranormal Theories.
Excellent. You can find Paul on Paranormal Theories. And again, that's researcher Jason Hewlett's new show, and you'll find that linked on our website at ghoststoryguys.com. You'll find it in the blog, and you'll also see it on our various social media. Do you have any other spots coming up, Paul?
I'm doing a spot on Saturday. I will be speaking with the guys from Believing the Bizarre podcast on Saturday, and that'll be out towards the end of April, I believe.
Very cool. Well, as for me, I've got a spot on the Paranormal Podcast, which I mentioned the last time around. That should be coming out soon. I just had to send Jim Harold over my isolated audio track, and I think that is it for guest appearances so far. No one wants me in their clubhouse, Paul, and, well, frankly, I get it.
They don't know what they're missing.
Or they do.
Well, people ask me, and then they probably regret it.
I very much doubt that.
And my talk in Sheffield has been confirmed for early May for the Pagan Pathways, and I'll be discussing forgotten and overlooked poltergeist cases at that. So if you look for the Airy Fairy Shop website, there should be some details on there on dates and where you can come along.
Very cool. And we will also, I'll try to remember to link that in the show notes. Again, you'll also find that at ghoststoryguys.com. And also, of course, your appearance at Strange Days is coming up in September. Now, when I tried to link that in last week's show notes, the website was no longer accessible. Do you know if they've fixed that?
Yes, I've been on it today because they've launched the poster today.
Fabulous. Okay, so check the show notes for a link to that as well. Again, Paul is speaking at the Strange Days, right?
Yeah, Strange Days 40th Festival, £100 for 3 days, including camping.
There you go. You can't beat that deal.
And that also includes me Well, not camping with you, obviously, but, you know.
Unless you ask really nicely. You know, send along your receipt and maybe Paul will stop by your
Depends what
campsite
treats
and
you give me.
have a cuddle.
We'll talk ghosts for spliffs.
There you go. That seems like a fair trade to me. And again, you can find all this stuff on our website at ghoststoryguys.com. Of course, not everyone can support us financially. We get that. Times are uncertain right now. So if you can't do that, we would really appreciate a rating and a review on iTunes and Spotify and anywhere else you can rate the show. It really helps bump the numbers, kind of improves our visibility. And on the rare occasions we check the reviews, hey, the nice ones make a difference. The mean ones, you can leave it. We're ignoring you because you suck.
Or you could set up a graffiti tag team and start defacing your local area, shouting, listen to the Ghost Story Guys wherever you can spray paint it.
There you go. We're not telling you to do that for legal purposes, but we're also saying that if you were to do that, we would not discourage you. But we're not telling you to do it, to be clear.
Don't do it. Don't end up like my old friend Fister, who ended up going to prison.
For tagging?
Yes. It became
Really?
a course celeb in the 90s. Yeah, he got 5 years and then it became like a course celeb. And he was released. I mean, he was prolific. He essentially tagged nearly every train in the north of England.
I still don't know that jail time is exactly the best use of public resources in that circumstance.
Oh, of course, you know, because it's horrendously offending Middle England.
There's some great priorities right there, folks.
It's not art, is it? It's not art. It's not in a frame. It's not with paint. It's not a picture of a lady. It's not art. Fuck off.
That's still the sentiment in many places, I'm sad to say.
Art is art.
There, exactly. Art is art. The Ghost Story Guys, not fascist, just bald, and art is art.
Bald and arty.
There you go. Bald and art. Ghost Story Guys, bald and arty.
That could be a double act in 1940s radio.
We got a future ahead of us, Paul. If the bottom ever drops out of this ghost thing, we got a bright future ahead of us in vaudeville as long as we invent a time machine. If you want to get some Ghost Story Guys merchandise, get yourself a t-shirt. We got stickers. We have all kinds of cool stuff. Head to ghoststoryguys.com. You can get some of our episode art on there as well. Of course, every story episode has a custom cover designed by yours truly. Some of them we can sell, some of them we can't, just for various licensing reasons, but we've got some pretty cool ones up, some of which are based on really fascinating original artwork, which is I'm always proud to do. Most of the stuff is done through combinations of Google stock images, but every now and again, I will license something through a site called ArtGrab, and those are perpetual licenses, and we can sell them and we can alter them, which we've done, and really, really cool stuff. I've actually sold some of my own photos through ArtGrab as well, which is pretty neat.
Cool.
But again, you can get all of that at ghoststoryguys.com. Our theme song, Radio, Into the Darkness We Go, is composed and performed by Peter Kursoff of Pizzanta Music. Find more from him by searching for Pizzanta Music wherever you get your tunes. That is streaming courtesy of course, Night Harvest Recordings. That is the Ghost Story Guys house label. You can find more about that at nightharvestrecordings.com. You can also find soundtracks to this show of some of the music we've played here. Again, on Spotify and other streaming platforms, wherever you go to search for Ghost Story Guys, you will find them there. And I guess that's going to do it.
We'll be back next week, but until then,
I'm going to take a nap. Also, into the darkness we go.
What you got in there? Is it any good?
Can I have some? What's happening?
I've got crisps.
Are people on heroin hungry? Because
Cheese and onion.
Okay, all right.
You can always tell, as an ex-pub landlord, you can always tell when somebody's had their methadone script, because within half an hour of having it, they will always want to drink lager and lime and eat cheese and onion crisps.
Really?
My personal experience of serving people.
Interesting. Okay.
There you are.
I'll bring lager in, or maybe I just won't go. I think I'll just save myself the trouble.
And I don't know, it might be different for heroin, but that's certainly what happens with methadone.
Okay.